Hey guys, Chris from the Ultimate Recycler. It's time for another scrapyard run. I've got the van backed up here. I've decided I'm going to do a load of heavy melt steel and then top it up with something pretty valuable, maybe brass, to make the trip well worthwhile. I'll show you what I've loaded and what I'm planning to load, and we'll take you for a drive down to Melbourne. This van's proving an excellent workhorse for taking scrap to Melbourne. Beauty of the van is I don't have to tie it down. There's no dramas with towing a trailer through traffic, and I can get 1.5 tons in this old girl pretty easily. She seems to handle it well. I don't want to go any more than that, but I can get a really good paying load out of 1.5 tons. So what I've loaded here is what they call heavy melt steel, or HMS, in size. So from my understandings, and let me know what it is where you are, it's anything that's greater than 6 mil or 1/4 inch in thickness and less than 1 meter in length. So there's a couple of longer bits there that are solid square, and they're about 90 centimeters. So that's, I believe that's the guidelines. I'll certainly let you know if there's any problems with it. There are some things here that technically may not be quite 6 mil. I haven't measured anything, but I think as long as it's not light gauge pressing steel, there's going to be no issues. Basically what they're after is good weight in a small area that can go into the furnace. So in each of those buckets I've got around about 25 kilos. So what you're looking at there is a bit over 600 kilos of steel, and that includes cast iron as well. I used to years ago sell cast iron to a foundry separately, and I got lots better money, but I don't think any foundries buy it these days, or at least there's none that I know of within a driving distance from here. So I'm going to keep going, filling the van with this heavy steel. Now I'm unpacking my 44-gallon drums, or what were they, 205 litre I think. I've had some drums lined up along this fence, and I've added to it over the last nearly 20 years, and you can see they go right down past the old van. I've mentioned them in an earlier video of how I pack them up and store the steel in them. They're up on bricks. They weigh around about 350 kilos each full, so 3 to a ton, and I will be mentioning this in my next upcoming backyard cleanup series as well, but I'll be doing this scrap run tomorrow, so you'll see this video first. But the plan with, as I mentioned in the next video, the plan of packing these drums full was to get a truck and a crane and load them all up and do one big paying load to Melbourne in one hit. But it's very expensive these days to get any truck and crane set up to come in and take them down for me. And seeing so I've got a lot of good value stuff to take as well, I thought I'd just unpack these, and all I do is just pull them out by hand. It doesn't take long. You get 25 kilos in a bucket really quickly. And sometimes, well, this is a bit messy because there's lots of nuts and bolts and nails in here, but when I was packing the drums years ago, I'd throw everything in there, and I don't want to do a load that the scrapyard are going to say, oh, we have to downgrade that. So I'm pulling out all the lighter stuff and just throwing it in buckets and tubs here, and I'll take this down as a load of pressing steel maybe the next trip to keep the yard being cleaned up, because I still have all these dry bodies full of pressing steel as well. But the pressing steel's almost half of what I'm getting for the heavy melt steel. So almost, I think it's about 48 cents a kilo, about 480 a ton at the moment. If I get a ton of it in the van, which I'm going to finish loading right now, that will give me not far off $500, and then I have half a ton to play with, where I can put some brass or some copper or better paying stuff to make up the load of about $2,000. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to keep loading. I think I've got enough buckets all filled up here to load the van for today, and then when I come back with empty buckets, I'll start working on a few of the other drums and just stack them all up until I'm ready to do another load. So that's what we're up to for now. Let's get to work and load the van up. So here we go, loading the buckets into the van. I did carry a couple up by hand for a start. 25 kilos isn't too bad, but having one on each arm is just a bit beyond me these days. In my younger days I would have done it. And then I tried to just carry one, and I kind of waddled up the plank there like a duck, and I just figured it's going to hurt my back. So went for the old gas trolley. It's a nice old solid rubber wheeled trolley, nice and strong and easy to roll. So I just basically did one drum at a time and wheeled them up, and tried to keep track in my head as to how many buckets we got in the van. because I certainly don't want to go overweight, and this weight adds up really, really quickly. So there we go, and so on and so forth. So that will do for the steel. It's not much of a load volume wise, but there's lots of weight there. I've got around about 40 buckets and tubs, plus a few super heavy extra pieces. 40 by 25 is 800, it's about 1,000. So I think there's a bit over a ton there. That will do for that. So what I'm going to put on the back, actually I might use the front section of the van. Because I'm only going to take, I've decided to take a couple of 100 kilos of brass, so that takes us about 12 to 1300 kilos. I can probably get these batteries in too, maybe a couple of 100 kilos here. I might weigh them just to check, which will take us to around 1.5 ton. The brass will be the big payer. We should get 1,600 or so for the brass. We should get close to 500 for this, so that puts us to 2 grand. The batteries are a bit of a bonus. We may as well at least go to our maximum weight, or our maximum comfortable weight. So I'll load up the batteries now, then we'll pull around to the front of the shop and select some choice brass to take down. The battery is now loaded in the center of the van, which will help distribute the weight a bit evenly. I don't want too much weight right at the back. There ended up being 265 kilos of batteries, a little bit more than I'd thought, but I wasn't going to leave 2 or 3 there. So that's starting to put a fair bit of serious weight in the van. We should be able to get a couple of 100 kilos of brass in the back. So we'll go around the front and start loading that now, and we'll be right to take off first thing in the morning. Okay, I've loaded all the brass. We now have a full load, although most of the van's empty, but we have a full weight load. We have 20 kilos of brass in each bucket, and this is stuff I've been collecting for quite a long time. It's all nice clean black brass, plumbing fittings, electrical bits, just lots of random clean brass. So 20 kilos, there should be at least 20 in each. I often put a little bit more just to make sure. So we have 5 at 20 there, we have 2 more at 20, and these 2 milk crates are larger pieces, like old P-traps and S-traps, all good old plumbing brass mostly. Some of it's out of pumps, but it's all clean. So 30 kilos in each milk crate, so that makes 200 kilos of brass. Should be a very nice payer to go with all our heavy melt steel and our batteries at the front. Alrighty, so that's loaded. I can now park the van ready to go down in the morning. I'm not going to go super early. The trouble is with Melbourne, peak hour goes from about 5 AM to pretty much about 9 AM now. So if I get down there for around about 9, all the tradies are at work and the traffic's a little bit better. So we'll take a good thermos of coffee and some snacks, and we'll hit the road in the morning. Good morning guys, about to hit the road. It's just 8:30. It's a bit of a misty, rainy morning, but it should be quite an easy drive down. Let's hit the road. I might give you some footage of the trip down. Okay, I'm just leaving a little town now. I was going to mount the phone so that we could enjoy a bit of the drive down, because I'm not supposed to hold it while I'm driving. But I'm going to have to buy a bracket for that, because I think, I know I like watching footage of the countryside and where people drive in other countries, so even the fact that they drive on the wrong side of the road sometimes. So I better put the phone down and we'll look at that for the next video. And anyway, I'll film when I get down to the yard. It'll take me about an hour and a half, I suppose, and I think the rain's supposed to stop, which is a good thing. Although we do need the rain, but it's, yeah, you don't want to drive in heavy traffic when it's wet, especially with 1.5 tons in the van. Okay, we have arrived, a pretty much uneventful trip. Let's go and let them know we're here and work out where we have to park. I'm still not used to this yard, but I'll get used to it after a few trips in a row. Okay, we'll start with the batteries. I had trouble getting a park. There was so much stuff in the yard and I couldn't really film because I had to keep out of the road of all the forklifts. So they gave me the dodgiest pallet they could find, but it doesn't matter because we're not going to have a full pallet load. But I just stacked all the batteries here. And as you can see, there was plenty of room on the pallet, really. Most of the batteries I had were good. They had handles on them, but some of them have been in the weather for a long time. The handles actually go brittle and break off, which is a bit of a pain. The other thing with batteries is try not to tip them over, because you're actually getting paid for the acid that's in them. Not to mention, if you tip them over in your yard, you're going to get acid everywhere. But see, if you can keep them full of fluid, it all helps with your bottom line. Now, I've often seen on scrapyard invoices and quotes, and when they're quoting prices, to say batteries strapped and wrapped, and I think that means on a pallet with maybe a shrink wrap plastic around them and straps so that they don't fall off. I see that all the time, and I've never seen anyone actually bring a pallet in all strapped and wrapped. Basically, you just bring in loose batteries and stick them on a pallet like I'm doing, and then they come along with the forklift and take them away. So yeah, I just find that curious. I've never seen anyone do it. But I guess if you do a big load and you're stacking pallets on top of each other, you'll want to have them all strapped or they're just going to fall apart. So there we go. After a little bit of a exercise, weightlifting, I get all the batteries out of the van and ready to take away. Okay, so brass unloaded, just in a little hopper here. It's hard to believe that that's about $1,650 worth of scrap brass just in the bottom of that little hopper. So that completes the easy part of the unload. He's bringing me a big hopper now, and we've got to empty all this heavy melt steel. Alright, so I've sped this up now 5 times, and basically I got the guy just to nudge the bin right up to the back of the van, and it was pretty straightforward, just sliding the buckets back to the bins and tipping them out. They all tipped out pretty easily because there was pretty well just mostly short bits. The handles of the buckets did get in the road a little bit, but I'll just be aware of not putting too longer pieces in the buckets next time. Have a look at the bins though. The scrap bins down there are so beaten up. Some of them are barely rectangular or square in shape at all. They've just been so, I don't know whether they run over them or the forklifts keep dropping them or something. He brings a bigger bin for me now because we realise we won't get everything in the small one. But yeah, it's a classic. I think there's a sign on the office that says days since last accident, and I think it was like over 12 months. But it should be like days since last accident with an empty bin, and I reckon it'd be like 30 minutes. They must just beat them up severely. Anyway, it was pretty easy to unload all this. It's amazing how quickly you can tip buckets in. I think I sped this up, but I think the whole procedure only took about 10 or 11 minutes. So that was pretty cool. And the van was getting higher and higher as the suspension regained its spring as I was taking the weight off. So, yep, it was really easy to do. So we will have replenished our supply of empty bins for home. Everything's empty, and he had to go and get another big bin, as you saw. So I've managed to tip them in quite well. It's pretty easy to unload. I think 25 kilos is a really good weight for those buckets. And they haven't picked up the brass yet. Better pick up the few things that I actually missed or bounced out. And yeah, we're just about done. Just while I'm waiting for the forklift driver to come and pick the bins up, I've been constantly scanning the stuff as I was packing the drums at home and now as I'm tipping it out. It's amazing how many things I see that I think, oh, I'll sell that in the shop. Because some of this scrap was packed away like 15 years ago, and it's amazing how your knowledge grows and you realise that some things aren't just worth a few cents, they're actually worth $5 to $10 to sell. I pulled out a couple of old hooks, and there's a lot of stuff I found at home as I was sorting out the 44s that found a few lumps of brass, like quite big lumps that I obviously missed when I first sorted it out. And it's probably easier to tell because after a while everything goes rusty in the drums, and of course the brass doesn't rust. So I had my magnet with me and I pulled out quite a few pieces of brass, so that was alright. Anyway, I don't think there's anything of value here. Certainly not that I'm going to dive in and save. Things like axe heads I do sell, but that one's been ground right down and it's burred over the top. Some axe heads can be worth a lot of money. I think that was only a cheapie anyway. But yeah, it just goes to show there's a lot of value in stuff before you get to the scrap. The scrap's the lowest value, and yet this tub full here and this one here equates to almost $500 worth of steel. So that's pretty good. I better hope they hurry up and come and weigh me. I'm going to make another coffee, and I'd like to get home by lunchtime if I can. Okay, at the risk of being drowned out by big truck noises, I'm in the van just about to leave the yard. Everything's finished. Shock horror on the way down, I forgot to bring my coffee. I did have hot water and cream and everything else, so I had to stop at a road stop on the way down to the service station and buy some coffee at an exorbitantly expensive price, but that's okay. This one can stay in the van for emergencies. Also, I didn't have a spoon, so I had to stir the coffee with the arm of my sunglasses. you've just got to make do sometimes, don't you? Now, the paperwork. Everything was pretty well exactly as expected. We had a whisker over a tonne of heavy melt insize, so that worked out at just over $500. We had 201 kilograms of brass, and I had it weighed out in at 200, so that's pretty well exact. $8.30 a kilo is pretty sweet. 1668, and the batteries actually weighed a little bit more than I estimated, so I must have just probably rushed when I was weighing them. $6.50, oh sorry, 65 cents a kilo, 650 a ton. So that's awesome. Over $2,000 for the trip. Very happy with that. Let's hit the road and get home. I'm not sure what time it is. Might be a late lunch when we get home. Home now, guys. It was just after 1 p.m, so that wasn't too bad. An uneventful run home, and it's good that the driving is, shall we say, not full of events. A nice easy drive. It was raining back here when I got here again. Luckily it didn't rain in Melbourne. There's all my empty buckets, so now I can start filling them for the next trip. Now I have a question for you guys. What do you think I should do if I do another trip? Maybe next week. Should I load up with a lot of this pressing steel? I could probably I could get a ton of that in, which would clean up nearly all of this fence line here. But the trouble is, a ton of that's only going to pay about $280, plus there's a waste levy on that as well, so I lose a few dollars. So then to make up a $2,000 trip, I've got to take a lot more brass or some copper, and I don't want to take all the good stuff all at once. So I'm thinking I might leave that for now, and I'll do another load of the heavy pressing steel while the price is good, and I know I can get about $500 worth in a load, and I do need to get some of these 44-gallon drums empty. Keep in mind that I may still have to vacate this block, and I'll talk more about what's going to happen with my place coming up for auction soon. I'm just a tenant here, for those of you that haven't followed my channel, and there's a remote chance that someone's going to want to buy my place and ask me to leave. If that's the case, I probably can't possibly take everything to Melbourne, and if I have to dump something out at the local transfer station, I'd rather dump all the low value pressing steel. So that's the way I'm leaning, but let me know what you think. The other thing is, I could forget steel altogether and just do loads of the better value stuff of extruded aluminium, domestic aluminium, copper, brass. I've got quite a lot of other good stuff stashed around. There's copper aluminium radiators somewhere, a big stack of them. So I'm thinking, because I don't know what's going to happen with the future of this place, I'm thinking I'm better off leaving the low value stuff, and if I have to clean up the yard later, I'll just run it at the transfer station and just dump it for nothing. It would be a real problem to try and move these quickly, and it would be such a shame to just dump these out at the transfer station for nothing, but I would have to hire a crane to move them quickly, and that would be the problem. So I'm thinking I've probably answered my question myself in all my talking. I reckon I'll do another load of heavy melt steel maybe next week, maybe the week after. I can empty about 3 drums, which will make about a ton. So I could probably do a few runs and try and empty those drums. Just ignore all the pressing steel for now and use my brass and my copper and other good stuff to balance out the loads. So thanks for hanging out with me, guys, and thanks for coming down to Melbourne in a quick trip this morning. I quite enjoy the drive, and the van really cruises well on the freeway. The weight's certainly not an issue for it, and it's great driving at home. It's like a race car. I mentioned that in the last video. So let me know what you think, even though I've kind of answered my question already. Hope you'll come with me for the next trip, whether it's next week or the week after. I am going to be doing finishing off another video on the Great Backyard Clean soon, and I'll let you know what the latest is with the sale of the property, or hopefully the non-sale of the property. So I'll catch you in the next one. Take care, guys. See you then. Bye for now.